Howdy, Cape Codders. Welcome to another edition of the Scannell Agenda. My name is Stephen J. F. Scannell. I'm on Facebook, incidentally. And today's date is Friday, January 5th, 2018. So Happy New Year. We just had our Happy New Year. I forgot my cranberry juice. This is just coffee. Happy New Year, folks. Hope 2018 brings us a lot of good things happening, and we got to work on that. So, the name of the show is OOPS, and that stands either for Obedient Oligarchy Police State or Oligarchy Obedient Police State. They're two different things depending on the order of oligarchy and obedient. Okay, do you remember 1984, the movie? Cape Cod Community College just had a play on that movie, and I'm going to try to get sponsorship to get that on our local access here. That was a great performance. And we got to get that on Channel 99. Now, there was also a book called Animal Farm. So between 1984 and the Animal Farm book, Orwell was trying to put across the point of view that you better keep an eye on your government. You don't want your government to get haywire, basically, to get too full of itself. And I do think that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at the government, basically, and a lot of people in the government and connected to what I call the oligarchy, and I'll spell that out, a little bit too full of, if someone said you're too big for your britches, okay, I think that would sum it up. We all know what that means. And of course, police state can have some pretty extreme definitions. We don't need to go to the extremes. We are having a problem here in the US of A. So let's look at it that way. We're having a little problem. We need to make a few adjustments. And let's look at it that way rather than get all let's say, I don't know. It's a pretty serious situation. I think it is. But people feel silly to talk about such things. But I've been thinking about it for a while. And I feel a little bit silly talking about it because, democracy, and this is a free country, and people can vote, and they vote for who they want to vote for. But I think we have a few problems. Having said that, I think we have a few problems with the Democratic machine, and I don't mean the Democrat Party. I mean, our republic here is suffering from some bit of, my mother would call it malaise, as I mentioned before. We're not as vibrant as we could be. So I think what we have going on is an oligarchy association of representation. Now, it's not, you're thinking, oh, that's just the rich people. But no, I don't think so. I think there'd be a list of people like, such as the agencies that run the clubhouses. They probably make a lot of money. If you knew, you may not agree to that, but you get people lined up and they're making a lot of money. And the medical systems are full of sanctioned fraud, I think. And I think I was mentioning on Facebook this morning something to the effect that Warren Buffett thought of our medical systems as kind of a tapeworm on our economy. And I think we could probably get the economy to grow 1 or 2% better if we used my systems. And I'm not talking about the socialized medicine that Britain uses, although I think we'd be better to copy that system than to perhaps try to fix our current system, which it may be beyond repair. But I mean, it's possible to fix it, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot easier, I think, just to copy the Brits and the Canadians and these socialized medical systems. They seem to work pretty well for them, and they're flabbergasted at what we're doing now. People going through bankruptcies and just everyone's hitting on this system, and there's so much Medicare waste, fraud, and abuse that you have to put your hands up and say enough, you know, and I'm a Republican. But for years, I've said, well, I don't think we should suffer with a 20% fraud level. And that was years ago when Jerry Studs was talking about single payer. But I think that 20% has grown upwards of 60% at this point. I think we're wasting probably 60%. So for the GDP of our country, you know, I think we can go to the single payer, Medicare for all, socialized medicine. Call it what you will. I don't think of myself as a communist. I just don't want to waste this kind of money. But with the oligarchy being what it is, a lot of people are lined up to get the free money that they shouldn't be getting. A big part of that is medical. And a big part of that is our government workers are getting free medical and free insurance. And so there's a lot of unnecessary alliance with the fraudulent system that we now have. Now, the Oligarchy Association would include also government workers, unions, and that means government workers, and also private unions that a lot of public contracts go through these, you know, the Davis-Bacon Act, if you build a courthouse, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just too many entanglements with the government. We need to go back to simplified government. I think FDR was opposed to government unions for a good reason, and now we're seeing why. Because you have this dual representation, and you're getting too much representation when you have a job in the government, and then you have your vote, and then you have your union is saying to the Democrats, okay, what about you? How do you feel? Now, what about you, the Republicans and Democrats? And it's called triangulation. What do you think? Well, what do you think? How much do you think we're worth here? All right, so I really think this is toxic. And a lot of people feel that it is, but we're silly to talk about the oligarchy, right? It's just silly talk. Well, I think the oligarchy was born back 30 days after, let's say, somewhere around there, Governor Weld took office. That is, to me, when Governor Weld made good on his nasty promises to support the pond killers on Nantucket and to kind of dump me and get me under the bus, run me over with the bus. That was Bill Weld, but he wanted to get elected. He didn't want that Bill Silbert to get elected. He wanted to be elected, so he made the deals necessary. You know how dirty politicians are. They'll do these deals. So I would say the oligarchy was born here in Massachusetts when Bill Weld got in there and made good on his promises. Now, if you had to have a point in time, and you don't, when was the oligarchy born? That would be it. And the story with me goes like this. A couple of Democrats in ranking positions on Nantucket said, you lose. Bill Weld has signed off on you. You're done. You're toast. You know, he's not going to help you. He's agreed to help the so-called environmentalists. And these are the pond killers and the left-wing fringe in Massachusetts, environmentally. Now you're saying, what does that have to do with an oligarchy? Well, when you hand out favors, then in an oligarchy, the police will back up those favors and throw you right in jail. You're not to be heard, or, you know, an oligarchy is a power structure that is based not on our typical democracy, but yet it is based on something that really is, which is an association of interested parties, let's say government workers, rich people, banks, you know, the big financials who want their way so they can really hit on us and make a lot of money, sorry to say. And I think Hillary Clinton was solidly in the oligarchy camp, and then Bernie Sanders speaks about the oligarchy. And I think Bernie Sanders did not go to Nantucket to curry favor with the rich and famous out there and powerful. And I think the oligarchy, to my mind, if it's going to be based anywhere, would be based on Nantucket. If you go out there and look at how many jets and you count the jets out there, it's just phenomenal. It is the land of the very rich. And I've known a lot of them, and they're fine people. But you don't want your rich people or your poor people or anybody, any class of people, you don't want any mix of classes either taking over democracy. That's oligarchy. We need to have obedience to God with democracy, and that really works well. But when we start being obedient to these rich people with their aggregate power, and they, there's others included, well then, they're going to be saying, well, who do you like? How much do you think we're worth? How much are we worth to you? Well, Democrats, Republicans, they triangulate those two, and before you know it, the two parties get used to answering to, these oligarchy big media people and oligarchy party people. They're kind of hacks. They tend to squash good ideas, such as myself here with all these good ideas. Oligarchy people tend to protect status quo, and they're just obsessed with keeping things the way they are. Not much has changed in the last 20 or 30 years here in this country. We have a lot of bickering. That's another thing. The bickering that goes on is very indicative of oligarchy rule. And speaking of rules, in Congress, they call regular order. We've lost regular order. And we've gone down this slippery slope towards really both sides are agitating against each other. And I have a palsy. I haven't been drinking. So my left side is like, I just got out of the dentist. It keeps getting worse. I have a hard time talking. That's from herpes. So it's Bell's palsy. Can't whistle. Anyway. Obedience to the oligarchy puts God second in democracy. Obedience to the oligarchy puts God second. And I think there's a lot of Christian backing to this oligarchy. And I think Christianity has devolved quite a bit into a junketing service for Christians, for good Bible reading, preachy type people that don't really help the poor. I mean, if you present donuts to poor people, that doesn't mean you're helping the poor. That job has been taken over solidly by social services. Now, that used to be the purview of basically a lot of churches, and Christians would, and do-gooders and good people, et cetera, would help the poor, disabled. But now, we're in an age now where churches are on the fringes of helping, and they're happy to be on the fringes. That would be my point, and that's why they're happy to support these power structures that are just no damn good. They're no goddamn good, I would say. And God would condemn us for going down this road that we've been going down. Now, the Republicans here in Massachusetts are terrible. We have a terrible Republican Party here in Massachusetts because we have all these Republicans here that didn't support and don't want to support our president, Donald Trump. Didn't want to support him, don't want to support him to drain the swamp, because the Republican Party here in Massachusetts is oligarchy, and the Republican Party here is happy to work with, happy to work for the Democrat Party, and both parties are essentially representing the oligarchy, I would say, here in Massachusetts. And it started with Bill Weld, and then you got this string of oligarchy governors, Republican governors. But they're really in the corner of, the powers that be, the money. You support the list of, well, who's in the oligarchy. It's basically the financials and the rich and the big, I don't want to say big corporations, because there's a lot of corporate people who want good government. So I wouldn't necessarily say big companies. But the financials, definitely. The banks, I would say yes, definitely. do you disagree with that? A lot of people want, less money in politics. Well, I did a show here. I think it was show number 5 and number 6. It was about the Scannell Amendment to get money out of politics. I mean, I would say I didn't even get any comments. So there's no interest, I would say, in straightening out our government systems. And people like me are going to get slammed. I'm an activist. And I've been saying, there was a DNA switch. And, your newspapers are in the oligarchy, and you might say, well, I would say it's about 90% media-driven. And thank God the kids are not falling for it, but still the kids don't, and the young people, they don't have the effort level and the stamina, a lot of them, to get into this kind of thing. I wish they did. So if your young folks aren't getting into it, and I remember on Nantucket, I'd look around at the town meeting, and geez, there were very few people my age back then, 30s, in my 30s, and they just weren't showing up to town meeting. So that's a damn shame. I don't know what to do about that. I think, what do they call that? Lackadaisical behavior. I don't know. I was an elected official on Nantucket, lived out there for about 20 years, from 1979 to 99, roughly around then. Till the cops came and fetched me up, put me in Taunton State Hospital, put me in jail for basically nothing. Held without bail. I've been held without bail twice. I don't get along with these types of oligarchy people. See, I wanted a fair trial on the pond issue. And they said no, and they were going to back it up, these oligarchy types. When you get the Democrats and the Republicans pulling against you, and the rich and the media, in our current form of government, which is oligarchy government, you're toast. So, boy, But if we do the DNA test, and we find out that the oligarchy is corrupt, then we'll be better off. And, my son knows he's not my son, and they were trying to fix things because of a lot of corruption in the courts. They were trying to fix it all and get me fixed into Taunton State Hospital, and that would have been the end of me. But I got out. I went through 5 or 6 different dangerousness and commitment hearings, believe it or not. Yep, I can tell you all about that. I've never had mental illness, but I've got about 6 or 7 or 8 major mental illness diagnoses, which I've gone through on the show before. And I think Massachusetts Republicans will just take it. They're not going to fight the Democrats or fight the oligarchy. The problem is the Massachusetts Republicans, really. Because when I was going through this pond fight with, let's say, against Bill Weld, against Dukakis, against the DEQE, Department of Environmental Quality Engineering, it was such a stupid fight. And the Republicans just wouldn't fight. They just wouldn't fight. And I think I've got it figured out now, that since so many people are getting so much, all these little favors, it's an oligarchy. We don't have a two-party system. A two-party system has a minority party that fights. They fight like cats and dogs. We don't have that here. Our two parties do not fight. And we have a lot of people in the Republican Party, like Sheriff Cummings and Randy Hunt and our governor, and there's many, many more Republicans who totally oppose Trump. And his job is to drain the swamp. What does that tell you? I've drained the swamp at Hummock Pond a couple of times. I opened that pond twice. So, boy, it's discouraging to be put upon and have what should be your allies in the Republican Party just running away, like running, okay, running away. The FBI has supported this oligarchy and supported the corrupt police here in Massachusetts with this DNA test. And I hope the Nebraska Republican Party supports this, because Massachusetts is useless here. The Republicans here are absolutely useless people as far as uncovering corruption. But you'd think, well, why would that be? Look, it was the most ridiculous thing to kill these salt ponds on Nantucket. And then to, gotcha, Jamie, 10 more minutes. It was the most ridiculous thing that this fisherman has ever heard of. I've never heard of anything more ridiculous in my whole life as what happened on Nantucket. And then what didn't happen on Martha's Vineyard, because both Nantucket and the Vineyard have salt ponds, and the ponds get opened twice a year. They're right next to the ocean. And the tide comes and goes once you cut the barrier beach, and then for 2 or 3 weeks you get this tidal exchange. And these are the most productive marine environments in the whole world, let alone New England. These are nursery environments, hatchery environments. Things go in there to breed. There used to be barrels and barrels of seed oysters taken from Sacajah Pond. Seed oysters are worth more than regular oysters because you can broadcast them out and then harvest them later. So if you broadcast a bushel of seed oysters, you might get 10 bushels or 20 bushels of good-sized oysters out of that. So, I mean, that was absurd. And legally speaking, the ponds had to be open legally. And the Mass Division of Marine Fisheries was on board with that, but they got overridden by these kooks, the pond killers, I called them. These liberals who wanted the ponds to go natural somehow. Well, the other thing is, this might have been just one way for the rich people on Nantucket to really tick off the local indigenous population, the Nantucketers, and really just drive them off their own island. And now that I have thought about this for so many years, I do think that is possibly true, that these oligarchy people would want to do that. They want to take over wherever they are and, you know, throw their elbows around and run the show. Especially these waterfront types. I remember there was a nice couple on Nantucket, very nice couple, and they dedicated themselves, I think the name was Lovelace on Nantucket, a nice couple from, I think they were from Connecticut, Greenwich, and they would go around, and if a boat were out of place, they'd be going to you and finding out this and that, and you know, it's like the harbor master didn't exist, you know, and they would kind of pressure these people. You know, they didn't want to look at a boat that got beached for some reason, or something that didn't look like perfect, you know, in their eyes. They just wanted everything to be cleaned up. Even though, you know, that was a harbor master's job. But that's kind of indicative. I grew up in Harwich. The waterfront type people, I don't know if they were involved, but they nixed my father's article to get a couple of pieces of property right on the tip of Saquatucket Harbor. 2 properties, $30,000 each. These lots would easily be worth $4 or $5 million now. But back then, Dad had the article in there. He also had a stipulation that there would be a walkway to this area around the edge of Saquatucket Harbor, and that got totally taken away. I think Dad had something to do with access rights at Bayview, a property on Bayview, which was controversial. And on Nantucket, it's unbelievable. The rights of way on Hulbert Ave got stolen, basically. You know, the rich people like to have their way on the waterfront. It's kind of an oligarchy deal. They just like to have control. So I remember when we had our marine lab on Nantucket, it was probably the rich guy next door that had most to do with getting rid of the whole show. Just pulled the plug on the whole thing. They don't want anything going on, you know, unless it's a sailboat and some rich people. That's all they want. They don't want industry. They don't want the commercial fishing industry to do well because they don't want to look at it. They could possibly smell some lobster bait. Oh, that was a huge issue in Harwich when I was growing up, working offshore lobster boats. You know, I can see some of that. I don't like lobster bait either. So there's some good points. And I had designed, like I said on earlier shows, some of these really nice upweller systems that look like a pretty boat. So if you looked out at it, you wouldn't see this pile of plywood junk, you know, as an upweller for baby shellfish, let's say. So there's some points there, you know, that I would agree to, but I think there's abuses that are going on now, and that we've taken it for far too long. And this oligarchy has to be discovered. I call it the Nantucket oligarchy because of my history with Bill Weld throwing me under the bus and siding with the pond killers. I mean, Republicans should never do, they should be pushed back. You know, I should be supported by Republicans to do my work in fisheries, supported by Republicans to do my work, all kinds of issues that I work on. But I'm not, because we have an oligarchy, because we have a DNA switch. We can't even look at the green grid transit system. It's kind of pathetic, really, the amount of control that is going on right now. So it's something that you feel silly talking about. But there's one thing. You know, Mitt Romney got his start right here in Massachusetts, and he's kind of a scary guy. I didn't vote for him. I voted for Obama because, you know, I've had enough of him too. He was a scary guy. He worked for Monsanto at his younger days. And that gives me just, it gives me the, like, the chills to know that we'd put him in power. So we have to be obedient to God with a good democracy. Now that's not in the Old Testament, and it's not in the New Testament, but God gave us the Holy Spirit. Republicans here, I'm talking to you. God gave us this Holy Spirit, and we cannot be siding with these oligarchy deals that are going on. It's just not right. We have to show some gumption and some guts. And yep, 2 minutes. And we have to get on the stick. So I would say that if the DNA switch happened, the bill for that would be $40 trillion as a penalty to the oligarchy. There's a $40 trillion penalty for trying to steal our democracy. And that's got nothing to do with that lovely couple, the Lovelaces, who I dearly loved them. You know, they had their little quirks. So do I. That's okay. They were wonderful people. And so many of the rich are just wonderful people, and they're such hard workers. It's just incredible. So I don't mean to condemn rich people or any class of people, government workers, poor and disabled, but we just have to constantly handle things here in a democracy. Otherwise, if some malignancy gets in there, it's going to grow. And we don't want that. We want just straight up good old-fashioned democracy. So the money in politics. We need to put the cost where it belongs on the perpetrators. Our democracy is suffering. Our gross national product. Gross, you know, it's just gross. I mean, there's just too many at the trough, as they say. There's too many friends of friends getting rich off the government. We need to serve God, not money. Hello, Christians. You know, you need to get on the stick and stop persecuting me. Christians persecute me, and I don't like that. And if this DNA test ever gets done, boy, I'm going to have something to say to Christians, and pastors especially, about their dirty work, and these dirty goddamn pastors, and how they support evil here in Massachusetts. It's no damn good. It's terrible. All right. Serve God, not money. Straighten up and fly right. And don't forget, I sided with Judge Poland and Judge Judge Poland took the case. Okay, I got to wrap it up, but I'll get all into that maybe in the next show. But I've gotten into it before. That's the Scannell agenda. Thank you very much.